subject is marriage, more specifically, the marriage market. The ways in which caste, gender, and family economy intersect in the negotiation of matrimonial alliances. We often hear that marriages are made in heaven, but if we examine the way families, communities, and even entire economies organize themselves around this institution, it becomes clear that marriages are often made and unmade right here on earth, shaped by history, structured by caste, regulated by law, and negotiated like contracts. Today's episode is not about whether arranged marriages or love marriages are better. Instead, it's about understanding why marriage functions like a marketplace, what gets valued, what gets exchanged, and how these exchanges uphold or challenge long standing systems of caste, patriarchy, and economic survival. Welcome back to this episode of The Personal Lens, where we explore the political through the personal. And today we are diving into a topic that, on the surface, feels deeply personal, perhaps even sacred, but upon closer inspection reveals a labyrinth of social structures, hierarchies, and economics. Marriage as a social contract. Let's begin with the very idea of marriage as a contract. Across societies, marriage is rarely just about two individuals choosing to live together. It's more fundamentally about binding families. Historically, marriage has been a way to secure alliances, transfer property, ensure lineage, and regulate sexual relations. The French anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss described marriage as part of the exchange of women, a practice through which male-dominated groups form alliances by giving daughters or sisters in marriage. This exchange is symbolic, but also has real material dimensions. In South Asia, particularly in India, the system has taken on distinct forms through the institution of caste. Caste, as defined by M. N. Srinivas and later elaborated by sociologists like Dipankar Gupta, is not just about ritual hierarchy, but also about regulating marriage. Endogamy, the rule that one must marry within the caste, is central to maintaining caste boundaries. Marriage is therefore one of the strongest mechanisms through which caste reproduces itself across generations. If we accept this, then marriage isn't just a private affair. It's the very mechanism that sustains some of the oldest social hierarchies in the world. Caste endogamy and the logic of boundaries. Why is caste endogamy so important? Consider property, land, wealth, and social status have historically been tied to caste. When a daughter marries within her caste, the property she brings or inherits remains within that network. If she marries outside, however, the boundaries of caste and by extension property rights begin to blur. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, in his seminal essay Annihilation of Caste, made a striking observation. He argued that the caste system is sustained primarily through endogamy. In other words, caste will not survive if people are free to marry across caste lines. Ambedkar even described how mechanisms such as child marriages and enforced widowhood historically developed as strategies to preserve caste purity. In contemporary India, and the survey data backs this up, that majority of marriages are still endogamous. Love marriages, while celebrated in popular culture, remain a minority practice. And even there, families often push to ensure that the partner belongs to the appropriate caste or community. This shows us that caste endogamy is not a relic of the past. It is alive, adaptive, and remarkably resilient. Let us now bring gender into the picture. In the marriage market, men and women occupy very different positions. Men are often treated as assets. Their education, profession, and earning potential enhance the family's social standing. Women, on the other hand, are often treated as liabilities to be married off at the right time, often at great expense. The language around marriage reflects this asymmetry. Daughters are described as paraya dhan, a wealth that belongs to another family. Marriage is often seen as the ultimate settlement for women, regardless of their own aspirations or independence. This is where dowry enters the picture. The dowry system, officially outlawed by the Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961, remains deeply entrenched. Dowry is not merely about voluntary gifts, it's a structured economic transaction that reflects women's secondary status. We shall deal with dowry in detail at a later episode. Moving on, marriage is not only an economic transaction, it is also a tool of social control. Families often perceive daughters as bearers of family honor. The choices they make, what they wear, where they study, whom they befriend, whom they love, are closely monitored. Marriage, in this sense, is a way to regulate women's sexuality and mobility. By marrying a daughter suitably, that is within caste, at the right age, and with community approval, families safeguard their reputation. This also explains why many families resist love marriage. It is not just about romance versus tradition, it is about who has the authority to decide a woman's future. Now, the family economy. Marriage ultimately is about economics, not just individual income, but family wealth. In agrarian societies, marriage determined who inherited land, who controlled labor, and who had access to resources. Among the urban middle classes today, marriages determines who inherits businesses, who gains social capital, and how wealth is consolidated across generations. This is why sons are considered assets. They bring daughters in law and possibly dowry into the household. Daughters, in contrast, are seen as expenses. The family must invest in dowry, in ceremonies, and eventually lose the daughter to another household. This economic logic explains not just dowry but also skewed sex ratios in India. Families anticipating dowry burdens may prefer sons over daughters, leading to practices such as sex selective abortion. Thus, the marriage market is directly linked to demographic imbalances. Historical shifts. From colonial to contemporary, it is important to situate all of this historically. In pre colonial India, marriage systems varied widely by region, caste, and community. Some South Indian communities practiced bride price rather than dowry. Others allowed women more inheritance rights. Colonial interventions, such as codifying Hindu law, often froze these customs into rigid frameworks. Fast forward to the post independence period, the Indian state introduced reforms: the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, the Dowry Prohibition Act, the Special Marriage Act to encourage interfaith and intercaste unions. Yet, laws on paper often clash with social norms. Enforcement is weak and social stigma remains strong. Today, we see both continuity and change. Matrimonial websites, global diasporas, and even dating apps often reproduce the same caste and class filters that parents once enforced through family networks. And one might assume that urbanization and modernization have dissolved traditional patterns of marriage. After all, cities bring diverse people together, education broadens horizons, and jobs provide independence. Yet, research suggests that while the form of matchmaking has changed, the underlying logic often remains the same. In rural areas, caste councils or panchayats may directly regulate marriage choices, punishing those who cross caste boundaries. In urban India, however, the enforcement takes subtler forms. Parents use matrimonial websites specifying not just caste but subcaste. Even algorithms are coded to filter suitable matches based on community. Take Shadi.com, one of the India's largest matrimonial portals. It allows users to filter prospective partners by caste, religion, and mother tongue. This digitization doesn't dismantle caste, it reproduces it, just in modern packaging. At the same time, cities do offer slightly greater flexibility. Intercaste and intercommunity marriages are more common in metropolitan regions, particularly among professionals who meet in workplaces. But the numbers remain small. The National Family Health Survey shows that only about 5% of marriages in India are intercaste, with urban areas contributing a majority of that number. Thus, urbanization changes the aesthetics of matchmaking, but not always its underlying politics. Intercaste marriage and resistance. Intercaste marriage is often celebrated as a form of social mobility and resistance. Indeed, the Indian constitution provides encouragement for such unions with government schemes offering financial incentives to couples who marry across caste lines. But the reality is more complex. Intercaste couples often face stigma, ostracism, or worse, violence. In extreme cases, families may resort to honor killings where young couples are punished for transgressing caste boundaries. One striking example is the case of Manoj and Babli in Haryana, whose 2007 marriage across Gotra lines led to their murder by family members sanctioned by a local Khap Panchayat. And yet, resistance persists. Many young couples in urban India, bolstered by education and networks of support, are challenging caste barriers. Intercaste marriages, while small in number, represent a profound disruption to the centuries old logic of caste reproduction. Now, media and cultural portrayals. Popular culture plays a huge role in normalizing the marriage market. Bollywood films, for instance, frequently depict the drama of arranged marriages, dowries, and family negotiations. Consider Hum Aapke Hain Kaun or Hum Saath Saath Hai, which showcased marriage as a grand family affair, complete with negotiations, rituals, and collective decision making. The underlying message was that marriage is not just about the couple, but about uniting two families. Films like Two States highlight intercaste or interregional marriages, framing them as battles between tradition and modernity. Yet, even these films often end with the families approving the union, subtly reaffirming the idea that parental consent remains central. Television serials too reinforce the marriage market logic by constantly centering women's lives around marriage, dowry disputes, and in law relationships. This cultural portrayal has two effects. It normalizes the idea that marriage is the ultimate destiny, particularly for women, and it romanticizes the negotiation of caste and class boundaries as entertaining drama rather than systemic inequalities. Now, law, reform, and reality. Over the past century, India has seen numerous legal reforms aimed at reshaping marriage. The Child Marriage Restraint Act sought to raise the minimum age of marriage. The Hindu Marriage Act codified Hindu marriage, outlawed polygamy, and introduced divorce provisions. The Dowry Prohibition Act criminalized the giving and taking of dowry. The Special Marriage Act provides a secular framework for interfaith and intercaste unions. Yet, the gap between law and practice remains wide. Child marriage, though declining, still persists in some states. Intercaste marriages remain rare, despite constitutional protections. Legal reforms can only go so far without shifts in social attitudes. The family economy, cultural expectations, and social stigma often overpower legal mandates. But is the marriage market unique to India? Not entirely. In many societies, marriage has historically functioned as an economic and social transaction. In medieval Europe, aristocratic families arranged marriages to secure land and title. In China, dowry and bride price systems shaped family economies for centuries. In the Middle East, marriage contracts often included negotiated payments such as meher. What distinguishes India, however, is the persistence of caste as a rigid organizing principle. While class, race, or religion matter elsewhere, caste functions as a particularly enduring structure shaping marriages across centuries, despite modernization and globalization. This makes India's marriage market both unique and deeply instructive. It shows how old hierarchies adapt to new economic and technological contexts. So, where does this leave us? On the one hand, the marriage market remains deeply entrenched. Caste endogamy, dowry practices, and patriarchal control persist across rural and urban, national, and diaspora contexts. On the other hand, cracks are appearing. Education, urbanization, women's employment, and intercaste unions, however limited, are creating spaces of resistance. Young people are questioning the idea that marriage is destiny. Some are choosing not to marry at all, others are negotiating more egalitarian partnerships. Legal reforms, though slow in their impact, provide a framework for challenging oppressive practices. The question we must ask is, can we imagine a future where marriage is not a marketplace, where caste does not determine love, where dowry does not determine worth, and where women's mobility is not restricted by the fear of dishonor? This is not merely a question of law or economics, it is a question of cultural imagination. Until we collectively reimagine marriage as a union of equals rather than as a transaction between families, the marriage market will continue to reproduce inequality. To conclude, marriage in India is not simply about two people falling in love or choosing companionship. It is a carefully regulated marketplace, one that preserves caste boundaries, enforces gender hierarchies, and sustains family economies. From dowry negotiations to matrimonial ads, from Bollywood films to diaspora practices, the marriage market permeates our culture and social life. It reveals how deeply political the personal really is. As listeners, I invite you to reflect when you hear someone say marriages are made in heaven. Perhaps it's worth asking whose heaven and whose marketplace. Let us continue with more of such uncomfortable conversations, but conversations that definitely matter. Thank you so much for being with me. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share the personal lens. Give us your feedback and reflections at the email provided in the description. Till then, stay keen, stay critical, stay curious, and most importantly, keep looking through the personal lens.